I figured I would start tonight by just talking about the biggest story coming from the inauguration, but there's a lot of little ones too. The one I wanted to start out with was the one involving the Episcopal bishop, because I think if you need any more proof that Christian nationalism is on the ascendance in this administration, all you need to do is look at the completely insane overreactions to what a progressive Christian said in front of Donald Trump earlier this week. So basically, Trump got inaugurated on Monday, and on Tuesday, there was an inaugural prayer service at Washington National Cathedral, which is not far from the White House. And one of the people who spoke during that prayer service was the Right Reverend Mariann Budde. And you may have seen her on the news this week because she's been everywhere this week for good reason. She had the audacity to stand up in front of the president and vice president and their entourages and urge them to be like Jesus. And as we know by now, in the Republican Party, that's called blasphemy. So I'm going to play you a clip. It's a few short parts of what she said. She spoke for about 15 minutes, and what I'm playing for you is really the last few minutes of her sermon. Let me play that for you, and then we could talk about it and why this was such a big deal.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land.
It was a really, really nice sermon. I've actually, I'm part of a lot of atheist circles, and I've seen nothing but praise for that sermon. Like, I kind of wish there didn't need to be an inaugural prayer service in the first place. Why are we doing that? But setting that question aside, because they do it all the time, if that's what the sermon is like, it makes my job as an atheist very hard. But like, kudos to her. She did a wonderful job. She said something very important. Like, in any other context, that would not have been a shocking sermon. But he was asking the incoming president to care for the least of these, to find the humanity in everyone, to uplift instead of tearing down, to act like Jesus called for during the Sermon on the Mount. Like, at most churches, that's called a Sunday morning. At a lot of churches. But when you do it in front of Donald Trump, it's seen as an attack. They took it as a personal attack. And like, every white evangelical in the Republican Party was like, how dare that lady preacher say such heresy to the president. And of course, that very night, when Trump got back to doing whatever it is he does these days, This is what he posted on Truth Social. And we'll just go through this bit by bit because there's so much wrong here. Actually, before I do this, did you see Trump's reaction? If you're watching this on YouTube right now, like go rewind, watch Trump's face while she talks. He's never looked so bored, offended, unable to do anything because he has to just sit there and take it. But he looked so like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. What the hell? Like at any sermon, even imagine there's a million cameras on you. At the very least, you smile and you nod. That's what most of you did when you went to church as a kid. You were polite. That guy looks like me going to church. Like, what the hell? Anyway, this is what Trump posted. The so-called bishop. No, she is a bishop. Like, why are we insulting her title? What? She's not a bit. He's so bad at being a human. Okay, the so-called bishop who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning was a radical left, hardline Trump hater. Right, because what did she say? Did she use her time in front of him to trash him, to trash his policies? No, she said, hey, you're about to be president. You should be compassionate. And because of that, he goes right for the jugular. Radical left hardline Trump hater. Because if you call for being nice, you must hate Trump. It's the Republican Party for you right there. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. You went to her house. You're in one of her churches. That church that Trump went to falls under her diocese. She didn't come to the White House to give you a sermon in the Oval Office. You went to church and then you got mad that a bishop gave a sermon there. She was nasty in tone, right, because that's the word he uses when women talk. She's not compelling or smart. I know that's just an insult he hurls at everybody, especially women, but in what way is she not compelling or smart? She didn't say something that was factually untrue. If you want to say nasty in tone, I kind of get Trump saying that, but nope, she's a woman, so therefore she's not smart. Every woman who's ever spoken and criticized him is always not smart and always nasty. She failed to mention the large number of illegal migrants that came into our country and killed people. Right. I'm sure they were all in Springfield, and they're all Haitian too, right? It is a giant crime wave that is taking place in the USA. Yeah, in the White House. Apart from her inappropriate statements, where she talked about Jesus, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology. I just want you to imagine for 1 second any Democrat going to any church service and saying, I found it boring. And what the headlines would be if anyone did that ever. Of course, it would never happen. Because at the very least, even if you're bored in church, Democratic politicians know you got to pay lip service. Trump, who is the guy for white evangelical Christians across the country, is that church service was shitty. And every evangelical is yeah, he was right. That was bad. So that's how Trump reacted to a woman calling on him to follow Jesus and be nice. It's also, all she asked them to do is consider the impact that their power and their policies are going to have on countless families across the country. And the irony is that Trump's party has proudly and openly welcomed Christianity into politics. Only one side here is merging church and politics, Republicans. Jimmy Kimmel made a good joke about this one. Trump only likes mass when it's followed by the word deportation. But going back to the question of that idea that Trump said, what was it? That she brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. Let's talk about that for a second, because what she did, if you want to say she brought her personal politics into church, and how dare she, then let's get this off the bat. That is not a new thing. Let me show you a couple things. Do you remember Dr. Ben Carson? He ran for president. He was in Trump's cabinet the first time around. Trump made him the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development for reasons. But where did Dr. Ben Carson, how did he even get famous? Like, he was a prominent surgeon. There were like made for TV movies about the guy, but let's face it, no one really knew about this guy. But the reason he became politically famous, why? Because in what year was it? Like 2015 or so? Check this out. This is from The Week. But this is from 2015. The doctor who slammed Obama to his face. Ben Carson for president. Remember back in the day, people thought this guy could be president. Ben Carson, look at this though. A video of prominent neurosurgeon Ben Carson blasting President Obama at last week's National Prayer Breakfast has gone viral. With Obama sitting a few feet away, Carson criticized the notion that the wealthy should pay more taxes and proposed a flat tax, saying that God had spelled out such a system as fair with descriptions of tithing in the Bible. So in other words, Ben Carson delivered a sermon at a prayer event that Barack Obama had to sit through and listen, and he used it to trash the policies, honestly, way more directly than Mariann Budde just did. But he did it in front of Obama, and guess what happened? Did Republicans say, well, he never should have brought politics into church? No, they said, let's make this guy president. What about Eric Metaxas? Have you heard that guy's name? He's like a prominent conspiracy theorist on the right, very MAGA-friendly dude. How did that guy get politically prominent? Well, this is from 2012. If the organizers of the National Prayer Breakfast ever want a sitting president to attend their event again, they need to expect that any leader in his right mind is going to ask, no, demand that he be allowed to see a copy of the keynote address that is traditionally given immediately before the president's. That's how devastating was the speech given by a little-known historical biographer named Eric Metaxas, whose clever wit and punchy humor barely disguised a series of heat-seeking missiles that were sent intentionally or not in the commander-in-chief's direction. Like, Jesus Christ, get off your knees. But the point being, Eric Metaxas, who is a prominent conservative pundit at this point and liar, he became famous because at a national prayer breakfast, he trashed Barack Obama to his face directly, by the way. So my point is, Mariann Budde just says at a prayer event for Donald Trump, hey, Jesus said be nice. And these guys act like she did something that's never been done before, completely inappropriate. Absolutely not true. This is how prayer breakfasts work. And if Trump's people ever bothered to vet this person, it is funny to me because the reason they don't like her is because she's quoting the New Testament, and all these Republicans are like, no, we're Old Testament people. That's all we like. But you could see it in the responses. Like I said, Trump did not smile. J.D. Vance, I know you couldn't see him in that clip, but he wasn't smiling either. They did not applaud. They didn't nod or anything. They just sat there stone-faced, knowing full well that a request not to be monsters was like a personal attack on them. And she never said their names or anything, really. But if they had done any vetting of who this person was, they would have known this is not unusual coming from her, because guess what happened 4 years ago? Do you remember, famously, there was a protest outside the White House, and Donald Trump and his goons, they used tear gas to drive away peaceful protesters because Donald Trump wanted to walk to like the church nearby so he could do a photo op holding up a picture of holding up a Bible. Do you remember that? This is that picture right there that he took in front of St. John's Church. Well, that church is actually part of the diocese overseen by, guess who? Mariann Budde. And after he did that in the New York Times, This is June of 2020. Bishop Budde, Trump's visit to St. John's Church outraged me. She wrote this op-ed for the New York Times 4 years ago, and look at what she wrote in it. Same woman who gave this sermon this week. Had the president opened the Bible he was holding, he could have read passages calling on us to love God and our neighbor, to seek God in the face of strangers, and even to love our enemies. He could have read exhortations calling us all to the highest standard of love, which is justice. He could have even recited texts that warn faith leaders like me about the sin of hypocrisy. I love it because she knows, just like all of us know, Trump's never opened the book. The conservative Christians who love him just assume he has. But she goes on, Scripture is clear. Justice, which is the societal expression of love, matters most to God. Justice is also what is most important to those who are exercising their right to peaceful protest. So she said all this 4 years ago. And look, in a different world, maybe we could have a debate over, really, does God have anything to do with any of this? I miss that debate. I would like to have that debate about God's existence, but clearly that is not the point here. The point is, this is not new for her. She has spent her career calling for people to do good, to be compassionate, because they are inspired by their faith to do so, because she believes the Bible calls on them to do so. And Trump is like, she's a nasty woman. But the thing is, it's not just Trump that did all this, because the entire Republican Party has followed suit. This is what Representative Mike Collins, a Republican, tweeted shortly after that sermon. The person giving this sermon should be added to the deportation list. That is a sitting congressperson saying that an American woman should be deported. And I know the follow-up question is, where do you want her to go exactly? I don't think these guys know what deportation means. But also, what the hell? The same people who are like, free speech, we can handle criticism, we love freedom of speech. They hear one person say, hey, Trump, try being nice, and they can't deal with it. They're so thin-skinned where they're like, this lady needs to be kicked out of the country. We're the party of free speech. I do appreciate that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez clapped back to that one, to Mike Collins, and said this: what about the guy who did a Nazi salute behind the presidential seal? I don't think Mike Collins responded to that one. But touche. I love AOC right now. She's my favorite. Robert Jeffress, who is another MAGA Southern Baptist preacher from Texas and a Trump fan. This is what he said after this. Attended national prayer service today at the Washington National Cathedral, during which Bishop Mariann Budde insulted rather than encouraged our great president. There was palpable disgust in the audience with her words. I'm not surprised Robert Jeffress would be palpably disgusted, because Budde was talking about Jesus. And that's something Robert Jeffress doesn't do during his sermons. He only talks about Trump because he knows who his Lord and Savior is. There was another pastor, Jim Garlow. This is what he posted on Facebook. Look at how he treats this. She was anti-biblical as it relates to human sexuality. No, she was. She said LGBTQ people are scared. And she also, I think, referred to them as humans. And this guy's like, she was anti-biblical, demonstrating no awareness of God's design for male-female or God's definition of marriage. And this is a guy, by the way, Garlow, who's like, you know who knows how to do marriage? The guy who's president, who's been married 3 times and had like 5 kids with those 3 wives, and slept with a porn star while his 3rd wife was pregnant with his 5th son. That guy knows marriage. We love him. What else did he say? She demonstrated an ignorance of both biblical truth and historical reality, which, again, I would love to just mock the idea of biblical truth and historical reality being in the same sentence, but we're so beyond that right now. As one who supports the heartless mutilation of children, I don't remember that in her speech. She tragically supports the modern-day version of child abuse. Furthermore, she violated decorum. Yeah, within the Trump administration, you know what matters? Decorum. I swear to God, all of these people have no clue what they sound like outside their bubble. And then I think this is the last one here. This is from Trump's press secretary, his new one, um, Caroline Levitt. This is what she said on Fox about the bishop. She spewed lies. She said, be nice. That's the lie, apparently. She spewed lies. She should apologize to President Trump for the lies that she told. It's despicable. Like, man, don't you miss the good old days of Sean Spicer when this is what version 2.0 is doing? So that's how Republicans are responding to this. And if you saw any of Fox News this week, I'm sure you all did, this is how they tagged this too. Seriously, this is how they did this story. Radical clerics, anti-Trump warriors, left-wing bishop exposed. Like, my God, she gave a 15-minute sermon where she said, hey, Jesus said be nice. And these people have declared friggin' war on this woman. Like, Trump doesn't care if his white evangelical pastors bring religion into politics. They do that all the time. They replaced Jesus with Trump years ago. Cruelty in the name of God is always okay in their minds. But using faith as inspiration to help others, that cannot be. Not in their world. That's blasphemy. And again, it's not like any of it worked, I know, because since she gave that sermon, Trump has already, I think, conducted immigration raids. He shut down the app used by asylum seekers at the border. He's already signed executive orders against transgender people. So, you know, Jerry Coyne's happy. But like, it doesn't mean that sermon was pointless, because I think what Budde shows us is it is more important than ever to call out these Republican moral monsters to their faces, because you're really not going to get a lot of face time. They're not going to go out of their bubble. So anytime you see a congressperson have the audience where Trump is in, they're speaking in front of a national audience on TV doing an interview, they should use all their time. Don't tell me about bipartisanship. Tell me how awful these Republicans are. Tell me why you should be humiliated and embarrassed to have ever voted for people like that. Like, they need to know, Republicans need to know that their actions do not appeal to decent human beings, that no matter how much praise they get for it in their conservative bubbles, the vast majority of Americans do actually oppose Republican policies, especially if they don't know what party it's coming from. They look at the policy and they're like, well, that sounds stupid. It's like, yeah, it's a Republican policy. That's how that works. And it is ironic to me, and I said this earlier, that the same conservatives who whine about protecting free speech are absolute babies when they are confronted by speech they don't like. Trump has made it a habit to surround himself with sycophants, and he threatens everybody who doesn't fall in line. Budde had the chance to speak to him directly in a venue where she couldn't be interrupted, and she made the most of it the best way she knew how. And I think that's all we can ask of her. That's why she deserves to be called whatever praise she's been given, a hero, whatever you want to call her. Like, man, it's not like the mainstream media is holding the Trump administration's feet to the fire. So her courage should be applauded. I wish more Congress people were sounding a five-alarm fire everywhere they went. Like, if Trump actually attended this church on a regular basis, he would hear this stuff all the time. The only reason this was a shock to him is because we know he never goes. Like, I hope Mariann Budde is just the first of many who do not hold back in condemning this Republican administration in every turn. And by the way, she didn't even really do that. She just asked him to be nice. It wasn't much, but it's appreciated. And it's amazing that all these Republicans cannot deal with that. This is fair too. I wish her God was as nice and loving and compassionate as she is. Again, a great conversation to have. I'm sure there are some atheist channels that have that conversation. And to me, like, I do find it kind of funny how many atheist groups I saw saying, you know what, if you got to do a prayer, that one was fine. If that's a sermon you're giving, we're going to let it slide. I saw one right-wing person I know who chimed in with, oh, where are all the atheists this week? Where are all the left-wing, liberal, godless heathens saying we shouldn't have a prayer service at all? And again, my answer, which I did not give because I don't respond to people like that, is I would love to have the conversation of why we should not have a national prayer service, inaugural prayer service at all. We shouldn't. That should not be the default. But since we have it, good for her for using that opportunity to say what she did.